Hi, and welcome back to another My Chat With by AussieTheatre.com. Today's guest is a true triple threat. His career has seen him perform both nationally and internationally in major productions such as The Lion King and Aladdin. He's also been seen on the big screen in Mary Poppins Returns, alongside names like Lin-Manuel Miranda and Emily Blunt. Now, he has founded the AOC Initiative, a scholarship program aimed at providing financial assistance to artists who identify as Black, Indigenous, or people of colour. My name is Gabby, and this is my chat with Tarik Frimpong. Hey Tarik, how are you?
Hi, I'm well, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. So I wanted to kick this off by just getting you to tell me a little bit about what pushed you to become a performer.
Absolutely right. Well, both my parents were professional dancers, and they traveled the world, and that's actually how they met. My mum owns her own dance school at the moment in Melbourne called Dance Explosion. So I grew up with performing arts and dance in my blood, really. From a young age, I remember seeing Michael Jackson for the first time and trying to mimic his moves and moonwalk all over the place. And then from a quite young age, I think I was 10 or 11 years old, I managed to land the role of young Simba in The Lion King. And that was the first time. Prior to that point, I'd never, I guess, considered the arts as a viable career path, just because at 10 years old, I wasn't thinking what I wanted to do to earn money or earn a living. But at 10 or 11, I was lucky enough to take part in, the Australian premiere of The Lion King. And that kind of solidified that, wow, this is something that you can call your job. This is something that you can do for a living and earn money off and have an amazing time while doing so.
Do you think having parents who were also performers helped you as a child getting into the performing arts industry?
Absolutely. Well, it was just something that was always happening around the house, sort of thing. And as I said, my mum does own her own dance school. So from a young age, I was in dance classes and surrounded by great music. My dad was also a DJ. So he was always kind of playing tracks. And again, it was a lot of Michael Jackson from a young age that really inspired me. And he was scratching and mixing Beat It into Billie Jean. So it was in my blood and just constantly around the house. So it definitely helped. And then even as I've gotten older and continued down this career path, having parents that have been involved in the arts some way enable me to have, I guess, more comfortable conversations regarding all the feelings and emotions and experiences surrounding life as a performer, in terms of rejection from auditions, in terms of just the vigorous rehearsal processes and all sorts of things like that.
And your career has really exploded over the last few years. You've gone from West End productions and then doing Mary Poppins Returns, which would have been so exciting. What have been some highlights of your performing career thus far?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been really interesting, hey, especially with COVID right now at the moment. It's almost easy to forget that you are a performer at times, just because everything's obviously locked down and theaters around the world have almost entirely gone dark. But taking time to reflect on, I guess, my career thus far is really exciting. As you mentioned, some of my, I guess, I feel like I've loved most jobs that I've done, but playing the role of Angus in Disney feature film Mary Poppins Returns was just an incredible job, an incredible experience, and one that I didn't necessarily see coming. And it was just, one of the most experiences of my entire life, getting to work on a feature film set with Disney in London. I'd just moved to London. I think I'd been there for about 6 months when I was lucky enough to land that role. And the idea was to move to London so to hopefully have more work come my way. So for that to work out in my favor 6 months in was, it was really it consolidated that taking the leap and moving halfway across the world was the right decision. And that was the most amazing thing. But I've had so many incredible jobs. As you mentioned, Aladdin on the West End was really incredible. And I'm lucky enough to be a part of the team that they selected, or the cast that they selected, that will be appearing on the Disney Plus version of the show that will be coming out at some point in time. So I'm eagerly awaiting that. I have so many amazing jobs. Obviously, like I touched on earlier, The Lion King when I was young, as a job to start it all off. That was incredible. Being a part of Bring It On here in Australia was an amazing time as well. yeah, I don't know. I really love the art. So every job has something in it that makes it enjoyable for me.
I have to ask too, what sort of challenges you have had as a performer in the industry, whether it's been, as a person of color or as someone who's had to travel internationally to get work. What challenges have you faced in your career?
Maybe on a more personal scale, obviously, as you mentioned, moving overseas, and being so far away from your friends and family and essentially your support network, and having a strong support network, I think is vital for pursuing a career in the performing arts because of the rejection primarily and because of all the experiences associated with it. So obviously when I'm here in Australia and I have all my family and friends that I've known my whole life around me, that's a really strong support network that I feel comfortable within. But heading overseas, obviously, to pursue further opportunities, suddenly that support network wasn't as close and it wasn't as tangible. So suddenly when you're facing those rejections and you're so far away from home, you don't have that same support. That was personally something that was difficult for me. And I think for any performer that's planning to move overseas, I think that's something important that they just not reflect on, because it's something they consider prior to moving, as well as if there are performers internationally at the moment. I think it's just something that they reflect on and realize that they're not the only people going through it. So I think it's great to reach out to other performers maybe that have traveled from overseas and things like that, and try and build support networks amongst yourselves. So that's, I guess, a more personal challenge and something that I've experienced. And then, as you kind of touched on too, and in line with the Artists of Colour Initiative, which I founded during lockdowns here in Melbourne and during COVID-19 lockdowns. As a person of colour, there is just considerable underrepresentation in the industry across the board. And that underrepresentation leads for many uncomfortable situations, whether that's in the form of microaggression or the form of systemic issues at larger institutions. So that's just something that has always been something that I've dealt with, and it has always been it has been a challenge and something that you have to actively navigate. And I think often something that, I guess I can only really speak for myself, but I think I also speak for some people in the POC community, but it's something that you kind of almost have to try and push aside. So to try and push aside or push down in order to keep fighting all the battles that all performers have to fight in this industry. So I think they can really add up and really build up. And I think now with so many theaters gone dark and obviously so many people out of work, it's almost like divine timing in a way that it's allowed people to reflect, and especially allowed people from all different races to sit down, reflect, and have this really important discussion about, okay, how can we do something here about this lack of representation, and how can we better our industry and the art that we're all a part of it.
This year's been really interesting overall. We've had the BLM movement kind of really expand across the globe. And then, more recently with the Rob Guest Endowment, I think obviously these are issues that people of colour have been fighting for ages. And this year with the lockdown, it's kind of forced everyone else to really focus on what's going on and pay more attention to the issues.
As I was giving my last answer, I almost said that this time has allowed people of color to reflect on, these experiences, which it has, but realistically, we've been reflecting on them our entire lives. You know what I mean? And these are discussions, as you said, the Black Lives Matter movement has really expanded globally, but even before it was named the Black Lives Matter movement, it was something that Black people were dealing with and experiencing and trying to fight against throughout history. So it is a really exciting time. And I think obviously why this is a really powerful and hopefully monumental time, not just in the arts, but globally across multiple industries, is because COVID-19 has affected everyone, and a lot of people are out of work. So there are a considerable number of white people in all positions, in all industries, that are out of work, and are therefore they have more time to reflect on and really listen and take on the experiences of people of color. And therefore we can kind of meet halfway and have these really hopefully pivotal discussions.
Could you tell me a bit about how the Artists of Colour Initiative is kind of going to combat those issues and inequalities for the Black, Indigenous and POC artists?
So the Artists of Colour Initiative is a musical theatre scholarship program designed to provide financial support and industry assistance to exceptionally talented theatre performers based here in Australia that identify as Black, Indigenous or as people of colour. So it's currently manifesting in the form of a competition whereby applicants submit material of themselves, singing, dancing, acting, rapping, and this is judged by our incredible panel of 25 creatives, directors, choreographers, MDs, activists, performers, all of whom identify as Black, Indigenous, and people of color themselves. And they, along with me, will all work together to selecting our semi-finalists, which we've just announced, which has been really exciting, has been really received really well. So that's amazing. And eventually this will go on to have one winner and 6 finalists in total who will all receive a portion of, all the money that we're raising via our GoFundMe will be split between these 6 finalists, as well as another of kind of industry support prizes or industry support packages in the forms of headshots or singing lessons or studio space hire and things like that, all of things that can help bolster an emerging performer's career.
It's so amazing that you managed to do this by yourself, really. I mean, obviously you've got the panel involved now, but founding the AOC Initiative from the start was pretty much just you.
Absolutely, yeah. It has been a considerable amount of work, but I guess all the people that I'm working and fighting for gives me the energy to kind of continue the work I'm doing, or continue the battle, so to speak. It's interesting, as I touched on before, because essentially I've been doing the work of the AOC my entire life by just being myself, by being in the industry, by trying to aspire to be the best performer that I can be, so that I can be representative, so that I can be and inspire other young performers of color, other young kids with afros who've never seen someone with an afro on stage before or play that role. So it's a really nice kind of moment, as I said, with the downtime now and not being in work full time. It's allowed me to really pivot and put more energy into the, I guess, work I'm doing as an activist, especially in the theatre space, and to really forward the conversation regarding racial diversity in the Australian theatre industry. Because I touched on, obviously, some of the ways and some of the more tangible ways in terms of financial assistance and industry support that all the performers will be involved in. But there are so many other ways that just having the AOC initiative exist is also helping on a larger scale. It is forwarding the conversation. I'm having conversations with people like yourself. I'm having conversations with a number of other people behind the scenes as well as on public forums. The image of our incredible top 30 has been shared all over the place and has done, I think, an amazing job at helping with visibility. I think so many performers of color can see themselves in that image of these incredible, emerging, talented, inspiring performers. In the same way, bringing all these incredible 25 panelists together, there were so many people who saw that image and were like, wow, this is really powerful. This is really exciting. And imagine that was a cast release. That was often a response I got. And I had the same thing. I was like, wow, if I was going to a theater or going to see a film and that was the cast, I would be blown away and incredibly excited. And I think what's really exciting too is that all of these performers and all of these panelists are based here or grew up here in Australia. So this isn't, you know what I mean, something global. This is right here. This is honed in on Australia. We exist. We're here in this space, and we're ready to work, and we're ready to help, improve the Australian theatre industry. So it's a really exciting time.
It's super exciting, and I'm really hoping that, you know, the AOC initiative kind of kickstarts a change that we see across the whole industry, because obviously performers of color are here. They've always been here. And we've seen so many shows where, you know, race is not really a factor in the casting, but we still see the same sort of casts over and over again. And I'm really hoping that that additional visibility shows producers and directors and creatives across the country that, you know, it's really important for young kids, especially aspiring performers, to see themselves represented on the big stage. Because, you know, if we don't see amazing BIPOC performers on stage, then the next generation of performers won't pursue it, because, you know, they don't think that there's space for them. And then we get stuck in that awful cycle of only seeing the same thing over and over again. So, you know, this year and the AOC initiative, to me, it kind of feels like we've given the industry a bit of a punch in the gut to wake up and see that we need to show, you know, the diverse range of performers that we have in the country and actually represent them on our stages and screens.
Absolutely. Yeah, you touched on it perfectly. Again, it's something I've spoken about before too, but there is this really gross cycle that develops that you just touched on there, that it's if people don't feel welcome in a space and people are not represented in a space consistently over the history of that space existing, then it's going to get to a point where the people who aren't welcome and don't see themselves represented no longer aspire to exist within those spaces. And that is just a disgusting cycle that shouldn't exist. And I think that there needs to be a break in that cycle. There needs to be a kind of cog in the works. And it feels like AOC and the AOC initiative has the capability of being that cog in the works and really breaking that cycle. And that's exactly what I'm aspiring to do with so much representation, as I said, with the top 30, as well as with all of our incredible panelists. Yeah.
And even like having your top 30, you published the beautiful graphic of everyone. Yes, there are going to be the 6 winners of that bunch, but even having that list of 30 names and faces out there just kind of reinforces to everyone that these artists and performers are here. They may not win the AOC prize, but we can see that they're there and we can see that they're available for roles and jobs.
Absolutely. I think it's, as I said, there's so many different facets to the AOC initiative, some of which people are aware of and some of which people aren't aware of, that benefit the people involved in the competition and the people who aren't involved in the competition. As we said, there are only kind of 30 semi-finalists, but for everybody applied, they got their material seen by some of our industry's finest creatives or emerging creatives. And that's something that plays an incredible role, whether we like to admit it or not. But when you're in the audition room and you're singing your heart out across from someone on the panel, if they've seen you before, it's only going to work in your favor, because whether it's conscious or subconscious, they have something else to go off, as opposed to physically what you do in that room that one time. So that leads to the issue again with the underrepresentation. It's often people of color who do maybe get in the room and do an incredible job. They don't have that familiarity with the people on the panel. Well, I've actually seen them in this show, that show. I've actually seen them in this endowment awards show. I have seen them, you know what I mean? So I think the AOC is providing that exactly. I think on top of that, we also have a number of other scholarships, some of which I've announced already, some I'm yet to announce. So I'll just keep my lips sealed on those, but one being the Village Nation Scholarship. So there'll be 2 scholarships that will be given to 2 performers, that these do not have to be people who necessarily make the finals. These are just 2 performers that have applied, and they will receive a full scholarship to study at the Village Nation Performing Arts in 2021 and receive their diploma in musical theatre. So those prize packs in themselves are worth $12,000 each. And just getting a foot in that door and having that formal and consistent training for a year, I think is invaluable and will do so much to inspire and help those performers, as well as inspire and help other performers.
Yeah. And I have to ask, how hard was it to pick the top 30?
Like, so difficult. Yeah, incredibly challenging. I'm getting emotional now thinking about it. Because obviously I'm so thankful that it was a team effort, you know what I mean? And that the panel was involved in this selection process. But it was funny because I was debriefing with a lot of friends about it, because it was something that was incredibly difficult for me, especially being somebody that is still in the trenches as a performer and very much in the trenches at what I'm considering the beginning of my career. That I have submitted for these sorts of things, that I have been in the audition rooms and, you know what I mean, receive those sorry, not this time, the no, not this time kind of emails. And I understand how that can affect passionate and inspiring performers who love the arts. And it was really difficult for me. I've been on panels before, but there's something very different when suddenly you are the face of a panel or a team or an initiative or a company or a casting team. Suddenly when you're the face and you know that you will be linked with essentially the selection of the top 30, despite it being a team effort, I think that was something that was quite heavy on my shoulders for a little while, and something that was really important. And therefore, I thought it was really important the way in which I treated and responded to all 65 applicants who've applied for the AOC initiative. And that's another thing that I haven't kind of spoken on publicly, but I guess I will today, is that in the same way that obviously we're providing support with the top 6 finalists and the top 30 semi-finalists, we're also in the, we're on our way to organizing a Zoom Q&A kind of panel talkback situation that all 65 applicants will be invited to, and they'll be able to sit in a space and hear from some incredible Black, Indigenous and POC performers and creatives and ask them questions. And it will just be this really safe space, and really safe and exciting space where we'll be able to have conversations about whatever it is that's on anyone's mind. But I think one thing that I've touched on in a few other interviews is the importance that while the AOC is really focusing on the lack of racial diversity in the Australian theatre industry on the stages, but I think that lack of diversity extends to behind the scenes. So I think it's incredibly important that we are aware of that and focus on that. And while I am spearheading this initiative, which is looking at tackling the issues on stage, I think it's so important that we also have these discussions about what's happening in regards to diversity behind the scenes, because I think both these things affect each other. And as I've touched on before, I think going on from this point, if you're involved in the production or the casting or the creation of theatre or film or any screen work that one tells POC stories, or if it celebrates and champions diversity on the screen or on the stage, I think it's so vitally important that you take a look at your team behind the scenes and ensure that that same diversity exists within your company or your casting team or your creative team. Otherwise, it feels tokenistic to me, and I think it is tokenistic otherwise. And I think, as I've touched on before too, it's not about having X number of this race of people. It's not about, you know what I mean, like ticking boxes.
Like trying to have just token people. They should be there.
Absolutely. And I mean that across the board. I mean behind the scenes and on the stage. It's not about numbers. It's not about ticking boxes. What every person needs to understand that's involved in the arts is that having diversity in regards to race, in regards to ethnicity, will only benefit the art. It will only allow for more inspiring, exciting, impactful art. And hopefully that's why we're all a part of this industry.
The AOC initiative and this whole discussion kind of put us in a really great place for new work. A thing that I've kind of noticed is a lot of stories about POC experience are written by non-POC or directed by non-POC or music directed, choreographed, which, you know, they may be great performers, but who can tell the story more authentically than the people who are actually affected by it?
Exactly. And that's what I tried to touch on with this point I've been speaking on now. But that happens so often, far more than anybody realizes. And I think it's so important, if you're a part of this industry and you're really invested in this conversation, to do your own homework and go and look up who the writers were on shows like The Lion King, and who you know what I mean, the original kind of creatives were on that and things like that, because it's really interesting and it's really insightful. And obviously these things have happened in the past, but that doesn't mean we can't look back on them and say, oh wow, that's a great show, but there are also issues that are problematic. So how, moving forward in this space, can we improve on that? And as I touched on, I think it's so important that if you are a casting team, production team, creative on it, any work that's coming out, that one tells POC stories, especially realistically, you want diversity in everything that's happening, but specifically, and a great place to start is that if your show or your film project tells a story of POC, or it celebrates that diversity, celebrates ethnic or racial diversity on the stage, then that needs to be reflected behind the scenes. Because it's when there is that imbalance that then issues occur, whether that's in the form of microaggressions, whether that's in the form of blatant racism, whether that's the form of systemic or institutionalized issues. If there's that diversity behind the scenes, those things are far less likely to happen. Some of these shows that tell the stories of POC and that celebrate and champion diversity on the stages are incredible. But it doesn't mean that they're also not problematic when we take a look at it through a finer lens. And I think during this downtime, that's exactly what we need to do, and just work out how we can improve that. And it seems like a blatantly clear way to do that is to ensure that the same diversity you are celebrating on stage is celebrated behind the scenes. Because I think if you're involved in the production of art, but you don't practice what you preach, there's something wrong there for me personally. And I think that's just something wrong in general. I think as an artist, you should 100% be in alignment with what your art is expressing. Obviously, it was a step forward in the industry when we started, we started having more diversity on the, you know what I mean, on stage, and started telling more stories of POC. But the reason why it's also problematic, because then it's like you have to look into it, and I think it is blatantly tokenistic, but to look at the people who are really benefiting financially as well as in regards to their career by being the director of said show or the choreographer of said groundbreaking show. I think it's really important that then we reflect on that and say, okay, well, where's the balance in what you were doing for taking a step forward for people of color by putting them in stage? And where was, well, this is just a great opportunity for me because audiences are calling for this, and this is what's exciting right now, and this is what people want to see. So it's actually going to benefit me tremendously by casting said people. So it's you know what I mean? It's then that balance of, well, actually, is this performative? Which is ironic that we're in the performing arts industry, but is this behavior performative? You know what I mean? Or is this coming from a true place of wanting to lift up and celebrate the communities that your show supposedly does? So that's where then it gets to these really difficult decisions, and we have to get the scales out and weigh things up.
I guess on a lighter note, what tips would you give to any aspiring Black, Indigenous or performers of color that, you know, kind of just need a little bit of a confidence boost to make that first step, to go to that audition, to start those singing lessons?
Absolutely. It's so difficult. I think the best advice I can give, and I don't want to sound like ego driven in any way, but the AOC Initiative exists. I am here in this space. All 25 of those incredible panelists are here in this space. All of the, you know what I mean, incredible people who've applied are in this space. You are not alone. There are people willing to have any conversations you need to have. There are people willing and who want to support you in any way, shape, or form. There are a number of allies out there in the industry who also want to, you know what I mean, help and support in any way, shape, or form. If you're, feeling any sort of way and unsure about anything career related, like my email is open, my DMs are open, like please contact me personally, and I will 100% sit down and have that conversation with you and lend you any advice I can give or any support I can give. I think as hard as it is, it's like what I'm really excited about with all of the applicants who submitted for the AOC Initiative is that despite the pandemic, despite recent events in that industry, despite systemic issues that have affected them forever, they still showed up. They still put themselves out there for the AOC Initiative, which I think speaks volumes to the strength of these incredible applicants. And that's something that inspires me to continue to show up in the work that I'm doing. So I think that's advice I would give to any other Black, Indigenous or person of color performer. I would say, despite it all, please continue to try and show up. And I know how hard that can be, but hopefully from me to them, please do it, because I want to see you, I want to work with you, and I want to be in this space together.
I'm really excited to see where these semi-finalists get to, and whether, you know, the top 30 in general, if we're going to see their faces popping up around shows in the next few years. And it's It's
Yeah,
really,
I'm sure of that. I'm sure of that. Let me tell you, from the incredible, talent that we've witnessed on the panel, I think, the future is bright and really exciting.
cool. Well, have an amazing rest of your day. And
Yes,
thank you
I
so
shall.
much
You
for your
too.
time. Awesome. Thanks, Tarik.
Thank you. See you later.